Welcome to the Couples Edition with Alli and Elie.
This is a podcast where we will be sharing our perspectives on intentional dating and navigating marriage as two people from different races and cultures.
And sharing some of the behind the scenes of living an adventurous life to pursue some pretty big dreams.
It's definitely been an adventurous 4 years since we've known each other.
Yeah, it's been pretty crazy. What do you think has been some of the crazy things that we've done the past 3 years?
Ooh, well, we got engaged after only 3 months of dating. That definitely is probably one of the craziest and probably what we get judged most for.
What about quitting jobs?
Probably followed by both of us quitting our corporate tech jobs.
And fitting our entire apartment into a storage unit?
And selling almost everything we own to travel the world for almost 2 years. That was crazy. And to this day, sometimes I'm still like, I would never do that again. And then I would do it again.
Yeah, it's wild. Gosh, we did so much in 3 years. It's almost like we just had a sprint of crazy activities for 3 years straight.
And now we're homebodies living in our apartment in San Francisco, and we are both officially unemployed / self-employed, navigating this crazy journey. So there's a lot to talk about and a lot we're going to cover. Every Friday, you can expect a new episode from us where we'll be diving into topics on intentional dating and marriage and crazy life adventures and everything in between. Kicking off episode 1 with the most asked question that we get. Every single time I post anything about us being a couple on the internet, without fail, I get a question of how did we meet? So Elie, how did you find me?
Ooh, how did I find you? Oh man, I think you just came to me. I think I was needing you and you found your way to me. But thankfully, it was through a friend.
But let's be honest, you were on a pursuit.
Were
you not?
Yes, I was on a pursuit. It was a wonderful pursuit. Because I knew that it was time for me to settle down. I knew that it was time for me to find a relationship that was worth spending the rest of my life with. Once I got to that point, there were some exciting tools to use. And for me, it would have been online dating.
And I was doing the opposite.
What were you doing?
I was not online dating. I was not looking. I was living my best life and just believing that the right person would come at the right time. And sure enough, that you did while I was sitting on the couch. It's so funny because people always say you need to get out of your environment. You need to put yourself out there. You need to meet new people. I always just felt so confident that the person God had for me would come at the right time, at the right place, that I wouldn't have to strive or look or go seek for it. And literally that's what happened. I was sitting on my couch when my roommate looked over and was like, how do you feel about being set up?
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that because maybe that has a lot to do with how men should be hunters and gatherers in the sense of hunting for the right one and the right, I don't mean career-wise or I don't mean anything else. I just mean relationally, right? Men should probably be the pursuer.
So are you a big believer that women shouldn't be out there looking?
No, I think women should look. I think women should absolutely look. I don't think that women shouldn't be looking because you never know what you'll find. But I do think that men should take the initiative because I think it takes a man probably has to be available for a relationship for things to happen. So to make yourself available means that you have to go and take action to find availability, find time to date, meet people, so on and so forth. That's what I think.
So you were on Hinge, you were out on the prowess looking, and what happened?
Well, I wouldn't say that I was on the prowess. I was definitely, although I did mention that I was hunting and gathering. Oh, you know what? I was actively interviewing. Hinge is a great app. If you haven't used it, you should check it out.
Shout out Hinge.
So I had someone reach out to me in my inbox and said, hey, you've got an awesome profile. I'd love to introduce you to my roommate. And I figured, oh, wow, this is great. I love introductions. That means that they've been vetted by someone. Although I didn't know you're a friend, I do like the introduction mechanism.
But I think you left out, one of the biggest parts, which is that she explicitly said, I think you might be a perfect match for my roommate.
She did say that.
Because when you DM'd me the next day on Instagram, his DM said something like, hey, I hear we might be a perfect match. I'd love to find out.
Absolutely.
And now here we are 4.5 years later, and turns out we were a perfect match.
Well, how was it on your side? What did your roommate say to you?
I was sitting on the couch next to her, and she casually was just like, how do you feel about being set up? And I wasn't going on many dates. So I was like, why not? And she was like, I saw this
Wait,
guy.
why weren't you going on dates?
I just wasn't prioritizing it because I never felt peace about joining a dating app, and I just wasn't looking. I literally was just living my life, running my race, expecting that in the right time and in the right place, I would meet somebody.
It was also COVID too.
Yeah, but I was so social and I was
options?
always out. So even with COVID, I was still really social. I was traveling a bit. You were traveling a lot, but
I was.
I guess I just wasn't worried. I might have been impatient at times, but I never felt the need to take it into my own hands, and
Nice.
I'm glad I didn't.
Nice. And then what happened? So we get introduced, and
Tell them about our first FaceTime.
oh yeah, and I'm a huge fan of screening calls, so I took a screening call with you. Although we did have some great conversations in Instagram direct message. We had some great
I
conversations.
feel like we DM'd for a couple of days, and then we set up a FaceTime, and this man interviewed me for, I don't know, we probably talked for an hour. And literally I got off the call. It was right around the holidays. So I was at one of my family's houses, and I walk out of the room and they all knew I was on this call meeting some guy that I had been chatting with. And they were like, how did it go? And I remember saying, he is a perfect match on paper, but there was no chemistry. So literally after that first call, we had talked about so much that just chatting with you, I knew that we were so well aligned, but it was so awkward. And I know you're going to say that I was sitting up straight and my arms might have been crossed.
You were super uptight.
I was nervous. It is really awkward meeting somebody on FaceTime, but we talked about a lot of important things. And I think that set us up for the trajectory of what happened next.
Sure. For me, I look at those calls as like screening calls to make sure that I'm not going to waste my time. You're not going to waste your time. So I figured, let's get down and talk about the most important and relevant things. Maybe not all the details, but just the high level things that could probably screen you out of my interview funnel.
So we had our first FaceTime, and then I guess there was enough that happened in that initial call that we decided to have another one.
Right.
And then what happened on that one?
The second one was also pretty chill. I think it was the third one where we really hit it off. The second one was a lot more relaxed. It was still chill, but it was a good conversation. I think it was the third one where we had more humor, more romantic connection. We let loose. I remember it was the third one.
So it took a couple calls, but we kept having them because we had so much alignment, if I recall, which is why we were like, let's really flesh this out and see if something's there. So once we found the humor, then I recall, I think, getting off and being like, whoa, this might be something.
All right.
And so at the time, you were living in Mexico. You had been traveling.
Playa del Carmen.
And so we had to FaceTime until you got back. And from my recollection, we FaceTimed every day, almost every day. For 3 or 4 hours, we would fall asleep FaceTiming each other. And in that 3 weeks before you moved back, we talked about everything. I remember talking about politics. I think one of the questions that came up was, do you believe in capital punishment, whether the country should kill people or not? We just talked about every non-negotiable you could imagine that you would want to know about somebody that you might spend the rest of your life with. And I felt like it was really easy to have those, what usually would be difficult conversations, because there wasn't a flirtatious nature. I might have been trying to, look cute on FaceTime, but because we weren't in person, I think it was a little less awkward. And so it was able to just really get to the nitty gritty and find out who this person is and what they believe.
I think we probably talked about all the big moral topics, religious topics, political topics. It wasn't all fun and candies. It was a lot of pretty important topics.
But I don't recall.
We did have fun, though.
I don't recall it being unfun.
Sure.
Because I think we were so aligned that it was exciting to talk about difficult things and being like, whoa, you think that too?
You're right. But it wasn't pop culture, or it wasn't favorite thing to do on a Saturday.
No, it was definitely like religious beliefs. Where do you see yourself in 10 years? What's your life vision? Where are you going? What are the values that are most important to you, etc.? So then you move back to San Francisco. He cut his trip early for me.
I didn't cut my trip early. I cut my extended trip early.
Well, you came back.
You know what? I canceled my trip.
For me.
I came back to the States, and I was supposed to go back, never went.
Because of me.
Because of you. And it was all worth it. Super worth it.
Our first date was a disaster, though, because he was supposed to pick me up. So he rented a get-around car, and it broke down in essentially the hood of San Francisco. So he calls me, and he's already running late, mind you. He calls me saying, my car broke down. You need to come get me. I also don't have a car.
Wait, but why was I running late? You can't leave that part out.
You
that
should have planned
that makes
better.
me seem like a jerk.
But you should have planned
I was
better.
doing the Lord's work. I was at church.
He was at church and running late, but you know you were going to go to church?
I did, but I live on God's timing, not my own.
So on our first date, I'm walking to go pick up this car, and the only car left, because it was so last minute, was a minivan. So I'm on my way to go pick him up, and I'm literally walking thinking, like, this is never going to work out. Too many things have gone wrong already. He's late. His car broke down, and now I have to go get him. This is just not going to be a great day. And then we meet in person for the first time after about 3 weeks of chatting.
That was amazing.
I remember our first hug.
We had an amazing hug. Our first hug was very cushy, very cozy, very warm. It was amazing.
So we had a great first date, and we probably spent, I don't know, 6-8 hours together. And at the end,
where did I take you?
He took me across the bridge to Sausalito.
In what kind of car?
In my car, which was a minivan.
That's right.
I picked up. Do you remember what you asked me at the end of the night while we were parked at the lookout of the Golden Gate Bridge?
Yes.
What did you ask me?
Is there anything else you need to know about me before we start a relationship?
That's exactly how you said it, actually. And I feel like you were a little bit nervous.
Yeah, I was.
Because I essentially was like, oh my gosh, is he going to ask me to be his girlfriend right here on our first date? And it was literally the prelude question to that. And I said no, that I knew everything that I wanted to know. I now just needed to see if you were going to actually live as the person you described yourself to be. Fast forward 3 months later, and what happened?
I dropped on one knee. We got engaged, which will be a whole different story.
That's a whole story.
That was awesome.
We got engaged after only 3 months of dating. And I think most of our friends and family were like, what is happening?
Who gets engaged in 3 months? That's crazy.
It's actually crazy. And there's so much to why we did that, and all the safeguards and things we did in place with mentorship and everything to make that happen. So we're going to have to break that down in a full episode. But what do you think are some key takeaways that allowed us to move at such an expedited pace?
Oh, definitely knowing. The first thing is knowing what you want. Actually, before even what you want, knowing what you deserve. That's the first one. And then knowing what you want.
Yeah.
Then third, I would say, is making time to get it, which is super important. We were both working professionals. And although it was COVID and we had more time, we could have worked longer or we could have socialized longer with our friends. But we made time to make that happen, to see it through, right? We could have just said, oh, you know what? I'll hang out with you in 2 weeks. I'm going to see my friend. But we figured, you know what? Let's see if this is something. If it is, then it's an amazing thing. If not, you learn quickly.
Yeah. I think the biggest takeaway that I always describe our story with, I think you do as well, is intentionality. I don't think you could talk about either of us or our joint story without mentioning being intentional. Because from the very beginning, like you said, we both came into our dating experience having pre-made lists of what we wanted in a partner.
Oh, yeah.
We had sat down and wrote out
JDs.
Job descriptions.
Yeah.
We had a list of non-negotiables. I think I had about 5, and then a list of nice to haves. And what was so crazy, we hadn't talked about that. It was something we did ahead of time before ever meeting.
Yeah.
But then once we had met and we started dating, I remember the night that you read me. It was at your apartment on Broadway.
Yep.
Elie read to me his list and explained how I checked every box.
Yeah.
It was right after you serenaded me on the piano, I believe.
Great.
It's really cute.
Yeah.
And I think what's so cool about our story for me, and just gives me such peace about the peace that I had previously, is that Elie literally checked every box. Even my nice to haves. A few years prior, I had spent almost $1,000 buying like snowboard and stuff. And I remember when I bought it, I was like, I better marry somebody that snowboards, because this hobby is too expensive. I've already put too much in it. I need somebody that can keep it going. And sure enough,
now,
Elie...
let's be clear. I'm no Shaun White. Let's be clear. I'm far from the Shaun White, but I get out there.
Elie had just started snowboarding like the year before. So even like the most tiny details, it literally...
What were some of the details?
This is selfish maybe and very surface level, which again is why it was a nice to have. It wasn't a deal breaker. But I have always wanted somebody that was like a thick, large human.
Yeah.
And I think you are one of the largest people I've ever met. He's 6'4", 100 and a lot of pounds.
200.
Oh.
250. Bitty.
He's a big boy. And that is always what I've wanted. It's just like thick, muscular, and athlete. It's just always been I don't know. I believe that is something that God put in my heart because he had you for me. I don't even think that was a superficial thing. I just have thought that way since I was little and dreamed about my life partner.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'll leave this in the edit because it just sounds so superficial, but that is something that I just feel like had always been in my heart about what I was attracted to. And I genuinely believe it's because I was waiting for you.
Yeah. That makes a lot more sense because I tried losing so much weight and I genuinely believe I couldn't because God needed me at a specific weight that I could attract you.
What were one of your
nice to haves or had to haves?
Nice to haves. So not a non-negotiable. But let's talk about non-negotiables.
Oh, the nice
later.
to haves I can't say on camera. I don't think YouTube will allow me to say that stuff on camera.
You're kidding. He's joking.
You think I'm joking? Nice to haves. Oh, nice to haves were a great sense of adventure. Another nice to have would be a great conversationalist. Yeah, that's nice to have. I think that most people can have decent conversations with their partner, spouse, but I think being a great conversationalist is a really nice to have.
Yeah, I just remembered a nice to have that this might have been this was a non-negotiable for both of us, now that I think about it, was we both wanted somebody that not only loved traveling, but wanted to live abroad.
Yeah. I
had already lived abroad as an adult recently.
And I lived abroad.
You were from abroad.
I lived in Mexico. That's abroad.
Oh, you're right. So that was a non-negotiable for both of us just because we're both so passionate about traveling and that was such a big part of our lives and we both want to be global and we both love learning about new cultures and all the things. So that was something that I was not willing to be with somebody that didn't have a passport, didn't want to travel, wasn't a priority. So that's a great example of a non-negotiable.
Passport thick.
So what do you think are some key takeaways from our story that other people could apply to their dating journeys?
I think number one for me would be figure out what you need in life and figure out what you deserve. I think that's the number one thing. You know, I see so many couples and people who date and they date people that I think significantly misaligned.
Yeah.
Their morals or their views. Not saying that you can be changed and learn more from others, but I think figuring out what do I deserve and who am I think that is step one, is finding that out. Yeah. That way you have a benchmark.
Nothing makes me sadder when I hear people talk about dating and you ask them like, oh, what do you like about this person? Or what was nice about the date? And they say the most basic things that should just be common standard level of expectation, such as he opened the door for me. He was nice to me. And I'm like, being nice is a bare minimum. Everybody should be nice to you. That is not a non-negotiable to look for in a partner, because it's not even on the list, because it's so bare minimum of what a life partner should have. So whenever people can't describe to me,
only talk to nice people.
You should only talk to nice people. But a key takeaway, I think, from a date should be like, wow, we aligned on so much. We'll go into this in further episodes, but we definitely have a strong stance that you should find out non-negotiables about a person before you start falling in love.
Yeah.
Because once you fall in love, it's almost like it's really hard to back up when you realize, oh, this person doesn't want kids, or oh, this person doesn't have a passport.
Many marriages weren't based on romance. They're based
practicality,
on compatibility, financially, and compatibility in legacy building. A lot of the things that matter, I'm not saying they matter more than romance, but they matter so much. And people today forget about those things. And that's not to say to prioritize that over romance, but making sure that it is a priority to figure out early, right?
I completely agree. Every week, we're going to have a section called Deep Dive Tea Time, where we're going to ask each other a question that is potentially controversial, deep, and shares some tea. So this week's question, based on the topic of meeting and dating, is how did my race and my American culture influence your thoughts about our compatibility?
I would say, so my background involved a lot of white people. When my family moved here when I was 6 in 99, my family had welcomed a lot of white people because my parents were learning English, they were finding jobs, and so they were befriending a lot of people that were able to help them access a lot of those things. And for whatever reason, they were white people. We have a family friend, her name is Bobby, and she's got an amazing family, beautiful kids, and she's a white woman. And she was a cornerstone of a big part of my development. And for whatever reason, she had mixed kids. She she adopted many kids. Anyways, and so having grown up in an environment where a lot of folks like Bobby were around, I had aunts and uncles who were white that were around. I think I was very familiar with being around white people for sure. And so I would say that like the racial category was less of a topic. Culturally, I think was a bigger topic.
Say more.
Well, obviously being African in America, one, you're having to figure out what it looks like to be African in America. And on top of that, you're also having to figure out how to be African American in America. That's a whole different topic. But culturally, the Congolese culture has certain ways that they handle marriage and dating and relationships and family. These different factors are things that my family have opinions on or have thoughts on or have traditions and have customs. So when you're dating someone, it isn't just a matter of figuring out, is this person Congolese or not? It's more so, can this person adapt and participate in this culture or accept, honor, and respect that culture? I think that was super important. So I think for me, a lot of it has to do with, is someone open-minded enough, if someone experienced enough with different cultures and different ecosystems to be able to gel very well with myself, my culture, because I still carry a bit of that. I definitely would say that I carry a lot of American nature, or I think family-wise, that cultural aspect still carries a lot of weight.
So how did I do? How did you determine that this would work, given what you just said?
Well, one, you were very well traveled, so you had seen a lot of the world, a lot of cultures. Two, you had also spent some time around different cultures. Your family and your parents have African friends. So
how did you find that out, though? Did you know? Like, I guess early on, for example, you wanted to date me the day we met in person.
Well,
and you didn't know a lot of that then.
That is true. And perhaps that's what the process of dating is, finding out a lot of those things, right? So you may have checked off a lot of obvious boxes, but now when you get to the nitty gritty, which is culture and which is relationship with family, then you learn more. So I got to learn about your family. I got to learn a lot about your background, and then also seeing you adapt and seeing you respect and seeing you honor, seeing you actually take part in the things that I think are important for this to work out, which is acting on things related to my culture. I would say that that's how I figured out, you know what, like, this is going to work out. You do a great job of blending cultures, which is super important, right?
How high was race and culture on your list of things to examine while we were dating?
Culture, definitely super high. And race, a little bit. Race, not so much, because I went to public schools, so I was surrounded by many races and people from all different places. And so maybe not so much, but culture was a big thing, which is why we went to go see my family maybe 3 weeks after.
On my bachelor hometown date?
Bachelorette or bachelor?
Yeah, bachelorette.
Yeah. 3 weeks after we started dating.
Was it 3 weeks? Soon? No. I don't think it was that soon.
I think it was like a month.
It might have been.
I made sure it's fast. I made sure it's soon.
It was really fast. So maybe about a month into dating, we went on what I like to call bachelorette hometown dates, where we flew around the country to all of the different parts of our families, and we met almost everybody.
And that was important to me, because the sooner I can get you in the door to demo you to my family and see, can she
make fufu?
Yeah, can she make fufu? Can she engage in the culture? I think that was huge.
So I passed the test.
Yes, you definitely passed the test. Culture is huge, very, very important to me, more so for the blending of our families.
Extended families, yeah.
Extended families. And also how we decide to create our own culture, because as much as I grew up in America, I think that you can still create your own culture that may not feel so American.
Right, a hybrid. I think that's something I love about our travels too, is every country that we've lived in, we always take a moment to stop and analyze, what do we like about this country and its culture? What do we not like? And what do we want to bring into our culture? Which I think is really cool. And I feel like our kids are just going to be a blend of so many things from our travels.
Yeah. How did you feel about the whole race situation?
You're Black? It's always funny to me when not only do we get a ton of racist comments on Instagram, but every once in a while there'll be somebody that's like, he's Black. And I'm like, what? Nobody told me?
Dang, I didn't.
Oh my gosh, did you know? Race and culture. I mean, I guess race is the first thing I knew because when I met you, I don't think I understood that you were Congolese or an immigrant necessarily. I think you had the Congo flag on your Instagram, but it didn't jump out to me as,
Yeah.
I didn't understand the full context of what that meant at the
Yeah.
time. Race-wise honestly wasn't a thought to me. And I think that surprises most people when we've shared bits of our stories before is because obviously America is so racially divided, black, white, there's so much history. But I think something that for both of us and our stories is both of our families grew up around diversity. I grew up at a predominantly black, predominantly African church growing up my whole life. It was never a thought to me about somebody's skin color growing up in that environment. And it wasn't until later in my teens and adults that I started to think more about just the implications of race and being more informed and trying, to better educate myself about the realities of being a person of color and all of that. But I grew up in such an environment where I genuinely never thought about somebody's skin color. People were just people.
Yep.
And my family behaved that way. So it was never a weird thought to me like, oh, I can't bring somebody home that looks different. All of my siblings and I have dated people of different races and cultures. And now my two other siblings, all three of us have married people of different cultures or races. So I think it's just an example of the type of environment and family that I grew up in. So it was never really much of a thought to me. Now, when I started to understand Congolese culture and everything that meant, which in fairness, I don't even think, especially because our timeline was so quick, I don't think I really understood the depths of what I was getting into.
No way.
Until planning our wedding, which that will be a whole episode. But yeah, I think for me, because I had grown up around a lot of Africans.
Yeah.
I loved the idea of getting to embrace and learn somebody else's culture. I was down to have a dot and, everybody get our outfits on and eat Congolese food and learn Congolese dances. Like everything about it was exciting and interesting to me to get to be a part of. I don't know if this is boring, but I think both of us, just having grown up in families that were so open to diversity and other people and traveling, just race and culture were not roadblocks for us.
Yeah. We got lucky that we had experiences that allowed us to be open and welcoming of how we look.
Yeah.
Or probably even potentially gravitate.
Yeah, I definitely think we can talk more on our families and their responses later. But in general, it was not an issue or a hindrance for us.
Yeah, it was great. But something that we also didn't expect is how much drama we'd get from my families. And it's funny because none of it was even racial. People would think.
Yeah, definitely I was unprepared. And it's funny because I think in the brief moments we've talked about it, some people are like, well, why didn't you better prepare me? And
I wasn't prepared.
There was a lot.
It was pretty crazy.
So we'll have to figure out how we tell that story and navigate the drama.
There are so many webs to go down on that. So many things to learn too, and so many things that any interracial or any intercultural couple relationship could take away from, because getting married between different cultures is a huge situation.
Undertaking.
It's huge.
Yeah. Just because there's so many expectations about how something should go based on a culture. And if you don't want to follow that.
Backlash.
Whew. So there's a lot more to share, both on intercultural dating, intentional dating, our marriage, and how culture has played a role.
We'll give some hints.
Our marriage.
Like we had to hire a bouncer for our wedding.
Oh my God.
Right? There was a little bit of...
I wasn't going to go there.
Was there any shouting and yelling?
He's going to bring out the tea.
Was there a little bit... We'll talk about that later.
There's definitely some trauma from both our wedding planning, our wedding day, and the aftermath of it all.
You got to come back for that.
We'll have to figure out how to navigate that. There's a lot more to discuss around intentional dating, red flags, all the things about getting engaged in 3 months and married after 11 total. And then I think it was 7 months after getting married, we sold everything to start traveling. And then 2 years later, we moved back, and now we've both quit our jobs. It's been a crazy road, and there's so much to cover and so much to share. So if you're interested in our story and more about dating and marriage, and we're going to talk about finances, give the tea on numbers,
money.
Hit that subscribe button and come back every Friday for a new episode. Thanks for watching the Couples Edition with Alli and Elie. We'll see you next week.
See you later, guys.